Hey y'all, welcome to the Liberation is Lit podcast where the power of storytelling meets the force of social change. I'm your host, Taylor Simon, and in this podcast, we believe in the profound impact of stories. And I am so excited to be joined today with author D.A. Murray, and we're going to talk about her book, Dominion Ascension, and all the dystopian writing things.
Yeah,
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We've got sunshine. We've got some tolerable temperatures here in Chicago, so I am not complaining.
Amazing. Same. But I was just telling my sister, I was looking at the forecast for this weekend, and on Sunday it's gonna be like 60, but on Saturday it's gonna be like 80. And I'm like, all right, I just
I
need you to pick a
know.
season, please.
Yeah, the ricocheting back and forth. It's so schizophrenic.
Right.
Just trying to keep up with it all, right?
Yes. So to start us off today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as an author and why you decided to write dystopian novels?
Well, I will say I have been a writer, and God, as long as I can remember. I started probably in elementary school, just writing poetry, writing short stories. I've been doing that most of my life. And I've always been fascinated by dystopian fiction. And I think a lot of it has to do with, just imagining what would the world be like if, that was just always such an interesting area for me to dig into and play around with a little bit. But I think that what really got me into writing this particular novel, Dominion Ascension, I just really started thinking about some of the experiences I had had over, the last 20 some odd years of working, being a Black woman in corporate America, working in tech, seeing, just various things happening around me, socially, politically, economically. And I just had something to say, and I think that that was really was the catalyst for me starting to write, and wasn't exactly sure when I first started writing what I really wanted to lean in on, but I knew I wanted to tell a story about power dynamics. I wanted to tell a story about how technology is influencing our humanity. I definitely wanted to flex in on women and how women, our roles and our power positions have been changing over the past several decades. And I also wanted to talk about what does it really mean what does coercion look like, right? What does it mean? What does it look like? So there were just a lot of, just very meaty subjects I wanted to tackle. And I thought the best way to do that was to tackle it within the context of a fiction novel. And so that's why I really wanted to lean in on a speculative novel as opposed to, doing something nonfiction or doing something very politicized. This was really much more about let's get people thinking about some of these very meaty topics and talking about it in a non-confrontation, kind of unthreatening sort of way or non-threatening sort of way. So that was really kind of all the ingredients, went into the bring, so to speak.
And that's why I love fiction to talk about difficult topics because it's such a disarming way to have these conversations without people getting defensive because you could get you can talk about it in a way that isn't going to dehumanize a real person and explore. And that's why I love speculative fiction written by Black authors because it's the people who are most affected by these issues, they're the ones who know it intimately to imagine a better future, what it looks like without. So let's talk about your book, Dominion Ascension. What inspired you to really explore gender roles and gender topics and like you said, the role of technology within this
Mhm.
novel, and what message did you hope readers would get from reading them?
Sure. Well, I think one of the thing is, I wanted to be very, very mindful and very targeted about an area. I could have focused on race. I could have focused on climate change. I could have focused. I mean, there's just so many things I could have focused on, but I wanted to focus on women because in our role in society, because there's been so majorly, there's been so many major seismic shifts with women with respect to the area of control of our careers, our families, our bodies. There is something fundamentally challenging around how do you talk about women today? And it's a very, very different look than it was even 20 years ago. And so for me, I really wanted to talk about it in a very intimate sort of way. And so that was it. I mean, I am a woman. I wanted to talk about what that experience looks like and feels like. And it was important to me to talk about it, in relationship to men, because corporate America is still heavily dominated by men. The experiences that we have today are, many times influenced, if not managed or led by men. So I wanted to be able to take the power dynamics and completely change them around and really look at what happens when the people who have the power are able to influence what happens in society. And so not a particularly unique component from that standpoint, but unique from the standpoint of the storytelling itself, and really I wanted to take a very personal perspective, which is one of the reasons I wrote it in first person point of view. I wanted the reader to get inside the head of the protagonist, Danny Matthews, and I wanted them to understand who she was and how she is seeing the world. And that's a very important part because as you read through the story, you'll understand that her perception of the world really does change drastically as she goes through various experiences. And so it was really about just kind of peeling back a really, really, you know, dinky onion and getting to the core of what does it mean to be human, quite honest. So I really enjoyed writing the book.
And I really liked how, and I'm not very far into the book, listeners. We talked about this earlier before we started recording. I'm about on chapter 6, but one of the things that really fascinated me was the use of this IQ testing um software that was, it says, choosing people's destinies for them. And I really like this commentary on how, yes, it's technology, and we kind of fall prey to believing that, oh, technology is inherently bias free. But we have to take into account that these artificial intelligences, these softwares, these tests are created by humans. So
Mhm.
we inherently program that bias into it. So I wanted to know, and we kind of touched on this, but how does kind of the social justice climate or just the climate in general, in how did it influence specifically for Dominion? And I know you talked about kind of like the the control that we were seeing on women's lives from jobs to our bodies. How else did this influence you? Did it make writing an escape for you, or did it make it more difficult?
Well, I mean, I think a little bit of both. I mean, definitely an escape from the standpoint that it allowed me to take myself out of, everything that is happening or was happening around me at the time and just really get into the feeling of what this society could really be like. I think one of the things that's so interesting and I was thinking about as I was writing is, coercion rarely announces itself. Rarely. It arrives framed in, like concern, tradition, economics, the protection, all of these things that sound really good when it's all about what's best for the people. But the reality is that that is often where things start to chip away, whether it is our rights, our freedoms, start to cloud our judgment or take away our perspective, even. And that is really what happens. And that's how Dominion really evolved. It came about because there were some really difficult decisions that needed to be made at a very challenging time. And there was no time to think about how people were going to feel about something. The people who could, grab the charge and move forward, those are the people who took it. And it just happened to be women for various reasons. And so the question becomes, you know, how much of how we choose to lead has to do with being male versus female versus, how do we think about taking power or gaining power and what are we willing to do to retain it? And so there's all of these really fundamental issues around structure and how technology is enabling a very uneven, unfair, inequitable structure. And you could argue, well, I mean, there's a lot of things about our society or have always been inequitable about our society. But there's something about, this idea of what does it mean to be human? And it's the human factor, the thing that really helps us, kind of make things equal. And how do how does that translate into how we are as, in society as human beings? And so, I really just took this dystopian, story, but I really wanted it to be about defining humanity and what it looks like and how it's evolving. Because I think it tells it's a very specifically, it's a socially conscious story within the context of a lot of things that are, definitely impacting us today.
I definitely agree. And I think it's really important to have that message of, yes, this is what could happen if we continue on the path that we're going. And this book is set not that far in the future.
Yep.
It's just 2030. So thinking about just how things can happen so fast, especially within the context of how technology is evolving in our current society. And I know with the 24-hour news cycle and social media, like everything is inundating us all at once. How do you stay grounded in this work and living in it, but also writing about it?
Well, I think one of the things is I'm incredibly selective about what I actually read and watch, and I'm also I question everything that I read and watch, quite honestly. I think you have to these days in particular. And so I think with that being said, I think I stay grounded and just focusing on the things that are most important, which is, how do I define myself as a human being and how do I show up with other people, with my family, my friend, my coworkers? How am I defining how I want to lead impact, while I'm here? And so that was another thing that I just thought was so important is I have something to say. And I think it's something that, a lot of people want to hear. And so I think that's what keeps me grounded is that I'm really am putting a message out there that I think is of value and interest to folks who really want to further explore this topic. So I'm happy about that.
Mhm. And I feel like it's very much a dialogue and we're losing a lot of that dialogue. It's we like you say, you have something to say and people want to listen, but I feel like we're in this society of we're just passively consuming everything and not questioning everything. So that is definitely an important message in this work. So speaking of your discernment about what you are reading and engaging with, what have you been reading lately?
Well, I'm knee deep in writing another book. It actually, Dominion is a trilogy. So been knee deep in that. And so I am writing. I actually keep it by me on all times. It was going to sound a little weird. I'm reading Vicious by V. Schwab just because I enjoy a great thriller. The Silent Patient. I love stuff like this. This is a lot of fun. And then I also started reading, there's this other book, and you're probably going to laugh and be like, what's great? Sociopath, a memoir. So I usually read about 3 to 4 books at a time, just depending on, what I'm in the mood for. But it's very important, I think, as a writer to just, read so many different types of books and just take it all in. So that's kind of what I'm reading these days. But
Yes, and I've heard really good things about Sociopath, actually. Haven't read it
yes.
yet, but it has been on my list. And I feel like with that book in particular, it's important to study because we keep throwing around all these, like, therapist terms and really don't understand, and sociopath is one of those, like, derogatory ones, so I was really fascinated to hear about her experience specifically with that diagnosis, so I'm excited to get into that one myself. So, do you have any upcoming projects that you wanna share with listeners?
Well, I mean, as I noted, I'm writing book number 2, so that's sequel to Dominion Ascension. And, I can't tell you how many times everybody asks me, when is it coming out? And what is it? I said, look, I'll just tell you the title. And the title of the book is Dominion Anarchy. And I think that should tell you a lot about the nature of society as it moves on, because the first book does end with a cliffhanger. So I am working very fast.
Yes, and you definitely see the seeds of the anarchy being planted. Well, I see it even where I am right now, so I'm excited to see kind of because we think, "Oh, the roles are completely swapped, and now we're in utopia, and everything is perfect now." And it's just like, "Oh, nope, everything is not as perfect as it may seem on paper." So I'm excited for that second book as well as finishing the first one. So, my last question for you today is what advice would you offer listeners who want to make a positive impact in their community?
Hey, take the time to really pay attention to what's happening around you and inside of you. I think that being intentional about your words and your actions speaks volumes about how you can really show up. I think it's important to think for yourself. It's great that people have opinions, and opinions are great. There's nothing wrong with it. But at the end of the day, you're the person that has to make the choice of what to believe, what not to believe, what to value versus not you want to value. And I think you have to really be in tuned with understanding what's important to you and find that story with you. Everybody has a story. Everybody does. And don't worry about, oh, are other people going to like it? I mean, there's going to be people that love what you're saying. There's going to be people that hate what you're saying. There's going to be some people who don't care one way or the other, all of that stuff. And you just have to accept that. That's how it is with anything, any art, of any kind. So I think you just have to know what you want to say and then find your people, which is one of the reasons I love, this platform, because I think people who see this and folks who are interested in the book will pick it up and if they love it, then that's my person, right? And that's who I'm writing for. I'm writing for the folks who can really understand and appreciate, the message that I'm putting out there.
And I love what you said at the beginning of paying attention to what's happening out here, but also paying attention to what's in here. And I love that mix of out here is going to influence what you feel in here, but also let it be a balance and not drown one way or another because the pollution starts with each one of us and each one of our individual stories. And how can we co create a better future together? So I love that so much. But thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was a great conversation. Where can people find you and keep up
Sure.
with your work for when that release date is dropped for book 2?
Absolutely. So you can go to my author site, which is damurrayofficial.com. So DAMURRAY official.com. And I also have DA Murray Official on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. So you can check those out too, where I focus very heavily on talking to folks and asking them, what are they reading? Why are they reading what they're reading? That kind of thing. So great social interaction there to find out, about kind of how people are seeing and viewing the world that we live in today. So a lot of fun.
Yes, I will make sure to link all of those links in the show notes and description. And of course, where you can get book Dominion and Ascension. So you can get ready for book 2 and be ready. So thank you again for this great conversation. And thank you, listeners, for being a part of the Liberation is Lit podcast. If you have any stories you want to share or just want to suggest topics or connect, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Liberation is Lit. Visit our website, liberationislit.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. And remember, your voice matters. And together, through the lens of stories, we're going to make a difference in the world. Until next time.